All right.
So tell me what your name is.
Anel Norman Block, as you well know.
And who are you to me?
You are my wonderful grandson.
Thank you very much. And where are we living right now?
At Carolina House of Lexington,
And how long have you
North
been here?
Carolina.
How long have you been here?
I have been here about 3.5 years.
Why did you come here to begin with?
Well, when I had macular degeneration and couldn't really see very well. In fact, I'm legally blind in both eyes. Not easy to function in my house anymore or tend to my flowers. And also my hearing is very poor. Until recently, hearing aids were doing me some good, but now I just spent $3,000 on new ones, and they help a little bit. That's better than nothing, but not as good as I'd like.
Was it hard for you to decide to come here?
Not a bit. Nobody had to tell me to come.
Well, I know, but a lot of times people that get to be your age, and how old are you?
92.
92, but a lot of times people, when they get older, they get set in their ways and they don't want to leave.
That's right, and I feel sorry for them.
Well,
because they're better off in a place like this when they can't function very well at home. I would stay if I could. I couldn't drive anymore because of my macular degeneration.
You haven't driven for like 10 years at least, probably. You're 92, you probably stopped driving when?
It's been a long time.
Probably in your 80s.
Yeah, because I've had macular degeneration.
What other kind of problems do you have? What have you had? You say you had macular degeneration and
hard of hearing.
Hard of hearing.
It would take you about a week to. I'd have to stop.
Well, no, but I want to go through some of the things. Well, when you say you have macular degeneration, can you see how many fingers I have on my hand?
Well, I know you have 5, and I can see they're all raised.
Okay, how about this?
Well, if that close, I can barely see 2.
Okay.
But if you got very far away, I couldn't.
How about that?
If I think about it and look real hard, I think you have 7.
Okay, that's good.
It's hard for me to see your thumb, but I think it's up.
Okay.
But close up, I can see a little bit.
So you can't really see people unless they get right up in your face.
I can't recognize anybody. I can't see their features.
Okay.
And I really like to know their names. But unless, if someone tells me their name, I've got to see the way they walk, or how tall they are, how fat.
Okay. What were you telling me earlier when we just got here and you wanted me to stop the tape because you might not remember things? What were you saying? Why did you want me to stop the tape? And you wanted to know some of the questions that I was going to ask.
Oh,
yeah.
I
didn't even know.
Well, because I might have to think about some answers, and I didn't want you wasting a lot of tape while I was thinking.
Well, and my whole point is, because I want to get the natural you. I don't want any makeup on. I don't want you to have to pre-think these.
If you told me that you were going to do this, I would probably have tried to rush to a beauty parlor and fix my hair and give me some higher eyebrows and all that good stuff.
Not going to happen, and we'll be doing this more, so I'm not even sure what I'm going to ask you, but I just wanted to get some of you on tape, so when you die, other people that maybe aren't even born yet can know who our grandmother was.
Well, actually, I would hope that somebody would be interested. I know that I have often wished that my grandparents and some other members of the family have kept journals like I've done all my life.
Right.
Because I would have loved to have known just how their lives were and what they thought,
a little bit more
what was important to them.
So you would have liked them to have had
I would have loved to, and that's why somewhere down the line, maybe it'll be my great-great-grandchildren, somebody might wonder like I did how it was when I was alive, what was going on, what I was thinking and doing.
I hope we're still there at that point.
I hope so.
Let me ask you, I'm going to be jumping over a whole bunch of different subjects, and then we'll do this again and again. Talk to me about what happens when we die. What happens when we die? Yeah, what do you think?
Well,
and first of all, what's either spirituality or religion are you?
I'm Jewish, but I'm more spiritual than anything because I believe in a creator of a universe. And I like to look around and see all the wonderful things that happen regularly and things that only a greater power than us could have managed.
So what will happen when you die? You told me before, but I want to know if
Well,
it's changed. When you die,
I don't believe in heaven and hell like Christians do.
okay,
And maybe nothing is, I think, is destroyed or invented new. I think things are just rearranged, and maybe there's something about a soul that passes on. I don't know.
because I know one time you said you just think you're going to die and that's going to be the end of it.
No.
So is that
No, I feel like, for one thing, the world keeps on renewing itself, and like I told Belle, my oldest daughter, the other day, when I die, I will live on through my children and grandchildren, because my children came out of my body. They were part of my body.
Right, well,
so I will live on.
Well, you'll live on, I'm looking for a different way. Do you think your spirit or your soul will continue, like in another reincarnation? Or will your spirit...
I don't know. I can't even guess about that.
So it's possible.
And I'm willing to take my chances.
Well, that's good, because, I mean, it used to be, I think 5 years ago when I asked you, you just thought when you die, that was it, nothing more, that would be it.
Maybe there's more. Who knows? Because
Okay.
there's so many things
Possibilities.
that you just really don't know the answer to.
Right.
I mean, I keep on thinking of how a sperm from a man and an ovum from a woman, so the sperm and the cells are so tiny you can't even see them with a microscope, and yet they unite in a woman's womb, and that those two microscopic cells. From that, they have all the instructions to make people
Right.
and to
And then those
make
people,
all the organs and everything functioning together in the brain, and you can see and talk and grow. I find it just absolutely amazing.
and
And
how does that happen?
how does it happen?
Yeah, no, I mean, how does it happen where you have two little things you can't even see come together,
They
and
do.
you have a life like you and me that can speak and think and see and talk and create?
I never cease to be amazed about that, and that's why I know that there's a power higher than us
Well, that's good.
that can allow that to happen. Because after all, you can't even see the two cells without a microscope,
Right,
and yet it makes people.
right. Okay, let's go back to, you said you don't believe there's a heaven or hell.
I think heaven and hell are right here on earth.
Okay, I think so too. What about, is God a judging God? What does the God want from us? Or does he want
I don't, like Christians, I don't think you have to be judged after you die.
What about while you're here? I mean, like,
Well,
does God want us to do certain things? Does he, like Christians would say, you know, you have to, I'm not a Christian, so sorry, Shay, but some Christians may say that we have to honor God, think that Jesus was the Son of God to be saved, and also that's part of what our
I
purpose
think
is.
Jesus was a great leader. He must have been. But if then people ask me if he's a son of God, I say, yeah, sure. We're all children of God, and I
Good.
feel that way.
So it's not
And
really...
I think he was a leader. I don't think he was supernatural.
Right. Like many
But
other leaders.
I respect the fact that he must have been very intelligent and compassionate and a lot of other really good things. A great rabbi
Right, a great leader.
all of his life.
Okay. Talk to me now about your health.
My health.
Like from 80 to where you are now at 90.
Well, until I was in my 80s, I practically didn't have anything wrong with me. I'd had
You were driving.
veins ligated and stripped in a leg on 2 occasions. Actually, my husband and a doctor, I had very little use for him medically, but a lot of use for him otherwise.
Right. So again, you had macular degeneration.
Well, when I had a stroke about 10 years ago, that's when I started going downhill, and that's when I lost my eyesight, and
Now, do you remember that stroke? I mean, do you remember how good it was, how bad it was?
yeah, it was bad.
But I mean, nobody would even know that you had a stroke now, and you came back probably
Well, I
within
was
a
feeling
year.
real bad, and I remember
You-
Bill or somebody was at the house, and my mouth began to go
into
to one side,
paralysis.
and I was mumbling, not talking plain, and feeling bad, and
You didn't really know what that was, though.
no, I didn't.
And then what happened? Did they call an ambulance? Or did
I
somebody
don't
just...
remember too much about it,
Okay.
but
But it ended up being a stroke.
I think Beryl took me to the hospital. By the time I got there, I was limping and having a hard time getting out of the car. And
Were you able to speak then? Because your mouth was...
I began to lose my speech, and the whole side, my right side all the way down, my legs, my right side, my arm, I couldn't move.
Okay.
It got progressively worse.
Okay.
But then when I finally got better, I went into rehab in one of the hospitals in Winston-Salem, and I was very...
you had therapy, because I remember
it was
going
therapy.
there.
Yeah, the whole family was so helpful. I feel sorry for people who don't have a good family like I do to help in times of need, because I was in great need at that time.
Right. Okay. You had a stroke. You had macular degeneration. Have you had both knees replaced or just one?
Both.
You have had both? Okay. And what about, you had breast cancer, right? Or did you have breast cancer?
I did have. I have mastectomy.
Okay.
One breast now, one kidney,
Oh, that's right.
2 artificial knees.
And how old were you when you had your kidney removed? For everybody out
Well, all
there.
of that has happened after I was 85.
Well, that
after I had the stroke.
Okay, but that was like one of the latest things, and for everybody
One
out
of the
there,
latest
you were
things.
like probably 88 when you had your kidney removed. And what was the procedure
I
called?
probably had it after that.
Probably after that, maybe
Well,
90.
it's been about,
It's only
maybe about 10 years ago.
No, it wasn't 10 years ago.
8?
Your kidney? No. Your kidney's been done in the last 5 years.
Oh, maybe so.
We'll have to ask
Time
Carol.
passes so fast.
But do you
lose
remember how they
track of
did your kidney? Because there were 2 ways they could have done it. They could have broken a rib and gone in to get your kidney, which they didn't do. What they did do was make a small hole in,
to loosen all the things that were attached to the...
and they just kind of sucked out your kidney in the small
Well, no, they
hole.
made an incision in my abdomen.
Right.
And,
But they went in
and
with-
when it went in with a hand, after it was loosened, and just pulled it out.
Without breaking a rib. And this is that
Right.
probably the
But
late 80s.
But the only really bad part about it, everything, I recovered miraculously from that. But I'm always in therapy after an operation.
Right.
But it turned out that I have hernia,
Right.
and evidently it was very small at first, and I didn't know I had it, but I began to bulge in my abdomen,
Right.
and it has gotten completely...
So it's basically just a aesthetic thing for you. It's not a physical problem. It's just
Well,
makes-
it doesn't hurt,
It just makes
but without a girdle
Right.
and without an elastic band,
it would protrude more.
it protrudes to where I would look like I'm about 8 months pregnant.
Okay, but again, you always complain about that just because you don't like the way it looks
Well, the main
and the
thing,
feels.
it doesn't really feel all that bad, but I can't, even with all the help with a girdle and a band, electric bandage.
Right, I know what you're talking.
thing.
Plastic band.
Plastic-
It only
plastic
holds
band.
it in.
Well, now I really just can't wear form-fitting clothes anymore, and I happen to have a lot of them, and I like to
Look
have
good.
changes.
Right.
So I'm just giving away most of my
That's
form-fitting
okay.
clothes.
You
and-
don't need that much as I look around your room. Let me ask you about your own family. Your mother and father, where did they come from, and where did their...
My mother and father were born in America. Their parents came from Europe.
Do you know where?
My
Father's side of the family.
father's side of the family came from
Sweden?
Sweden. My mother's, I think, came from Germany.
And
Some of the relatives were from France.
and your grandfather, which is, I guess, my great-grandfather,
On whose side?
on your father's side, that was Peter Norman, right?
Yes.
That's the one that we always go back to and kind of start from when you
Yes.
did the genealogy.
Right.
And you always talk about how brave he must have been to come here as, how old was he, do you think?
Well, I think he must have been a very young man after I wrote the genealogy book.
Before his 20s or in his 20s?
I think before his 20s, and we got in touch with, or rather some relatives on my grandfather's sister's side from,
Texas?
somehow or another saw one of the genealogy books somewhere and realized that we had a connection, and
Who is
we
this
got
that
in
we're talking
touch.
about? Who
They
is
are
this?
descendants from my grandfather's sister,
Who are we talking about? Who are you talking about?
Peter's Norman's.
Right, but who are you talking about? When you got, you contacted your grandfather's sister's family. Who is this family? Is this Lon? Or who are we talking about? Do you know the names of the people that you said when you got in contact with and they found the
Well, it was
genealogy?
either the grandchildren of Peter's, or the great-grandson of Peter's sister.
Okay, but you don't
Right
remember the
now, I
names.
can't think of his
Okay,
name.
Okay, just wondered. That's not Lon.
But he has gotten in touch with us and given us some extra history that I didn't know about.
Okay.
I think he said that Peter Norman, my grandfather, came over to California during the gold rush.
That's right.
I didn't know anything about
Did he
that.
come over with his brothers or by himself?
With some of his family, but the others,
Who was it?
I think the others went back, but I think it's a real mystery about how he got to Louisiana, to Patterson, Louisiana. I don't know
Because you think
how
he
it
may
happened if he was in California,
Right.
how he ended up in Patterson.
That is interesting. He wasn't married at that time when he came
No,
to
he
Patterson.
was just a young man.
Okay. And they had a plantation, correct?
The Norman brothers did.
But that's
the
him.
sons-
That's Peter Norman. And
Peter
his brothers.
Norman and his family had a sugarcane
How many
plantation.
brothers and sisters did he have?
8, I think it was. 8 brothers, 8 in the family, only one sister.
Okay.
Peter Norman's one daughter and about, I'd have to think about it, but about 7 sons.
Okay. Tell me about the plantation, because you know.
Well, they had-
wait. You were born in what year?
1911.
Okay. And
And I was just a young girl.
you remember? Did you ever meet Peter Norman, or had he died?
He had died before I was born.
Okay. But you grew up in Patterson, North Carolina.
Patterson,
That's where-
Patterson, Louisiana.
Right, of Patterson, Louisiana, thank you. See, you're sharp at 92, sharper than me at
Mhm.
44.
Just
so
don't
you-
ask me people's names.
I won't. But you remember the plantation, don't you?
Yes, I do. I remember going through the some of the sugarcane.
Was it still running when you were
Yes,
a
it was
young
running.
girl?
I think they were sold when I was young. I'm not sure of dates. It seems like I was maybe just starting school.
Like,
But I was old enough to remember.
so it was your father now who was now.
He ran
part
the
of it.
machinery. My father ran the machinery. Each of the brothers had a job to do. The plantation and the sugarcane fields were on one side of just acres of sugarcane on one side of the river. They had to cross in a boat to get to the other side, the town side.
Right.
And on the town side, there was a livery station.
Why did they have to go by boat? Couldn't they use a car?
Well, they had to cross the river, and there were no bridges then.
So back then, so when you were going to get your groceries from the house that you were living in,
Well, I lived, by the time I was born, my father had built a house on the town side. And so,
okay, but so
but the business was across part of the business was across the river.
So you're
and
just-
part of it was on the other side, in town. On one side of the river was a business, on the other side of the river was a country store, a livery station, and a bakery, all in a row.
So I always thought that the plantation was kind of in one place and everybody kind of had their own little job, but that's not true. It sounds like there were X amount of brothers,
Each had a job.
and some of the job was on the plantation, and some of the job was owning a store in town.
The bakery, the store, and the livery
Okay.
station, they ran all
See, I'm
that.
learning something. I thought they were all part of a plantation, but they were in two different places. They were.
On either side of the river, on both sides of the
Oh,
river.
gotcha. Okay.
The business on one side, and the stores and the livery station and bakery on the other
Okay.
side.
Now I know your father was named Felix, right?
Yes.
Felix Norman. He
And
was in
he
charge
made
of the
his middle
machinery.
name Ulysses, so his initials would be F-U-N Fun.
He made
Felix,
it. You mean it wasn't his?
Oh, he just made up a middle name.
Really? It wasn't.
Felix Ulysses Norman.
Oh,
It
cute.
wasn't
I
his
don't know.
legal name.
Okay, that's interesting. What about? I was going to ask you about the brothers. the store,
Well, each brother ran
a certain thing. And I know Felix was in charge of
the machinery.
to run the whole plantation, to run the
That's
sugar
right.
fields.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell me the story you've told me before that he was very close to getting a patent for harvesting. What happened?
Well, he was interested in inventing things, and he had a drawing board. I remember the big drawing board, and he did invent several things. We had the patents. I had one, and some of the other families had some. I don't know where they are now. I'm not sure that I've still got mine. I don't know whether that amounted to anything, but he was very good with machinery. It kind of surprised me because when he was growing up, I don't think there was a public school. I think he was privately tutored, and but he did go to LSU for one year. I don't know how he
study
learned.
what?
He was really smart.
What was he studying at LSU? Was he just? He knew
I'm not sure, but then he went to.
Now he knew how to read, right?
Wrote beautifully,
And
read and wrote beautifully. And that's what amazes me. If he went to just a private school, because there was no public school, how he got to be as smart as he was. He was very, very smart.
Where was Felix born?
Where was he born? He
Yeah.
was born,
In this country?
yes, because after Peter
What
came
state?
to this country
Right.
and
Oh,
got
that's right.
married, that
That's
he
right.
had all of his children in this country.
Was it in Louisiana where he was born?
Yes, all of them were born in Patterson.
So that's what you're saying. You don't even know if there was a school built when he was learning.
I don't think there was I don't
school.
think there was a public school.
You don't remember? I guess your mom would know.
But he did go to LSU, Louisiana State University, and then he went to a business school in New Orleans, and he boarded at my mother's boarding. It was called the Fashionable Boarding House, and a lot of the eligible, mostly Jewish men, I think, lived there and went to a business school, and that's how he met my mother,
And your mother's name was,
Blanche
and we always knew her as what name?
Deary.
And why? How did that happen?
Well, I think, I don't know, maybe before our children were born, she was wondering what they would call her and what we could call her. And I think she was the one who came up with the name Deary. And so
Do you know how
all the
she came up?
grandchildren called her Deary, and we got to calling her Deary all the time, too.
So you called her
And she
Deary,
was
or-
a Deary.
Yeah, she was very nice. I remember her. She was alive when I was here.
Yeah, she and my father were very different. She was a city girl, full of life. I liked to play cards, liked to have fun, very
Outgoing.
very outgoing. And my father was more retiring,
Was he very
but
social?
smart.
Was he very social or not?
I don't think he was.
He was a quieter man?
He was a workaholic. He worked in the fields. He had acres of sugar cane, and he made sugar cane syrup after they sold the
Plantation?
plantation. And then he had a lumber mill.
After he sold the plantation, did they have enough money to live on comfortably so they never had to really
I've
work?
always wondered how Peter Norman came over with nothing, and his mother's grandson or great-grandson that tells us he came for the gold rush. He must have done well,
Yeah.
because the family ended up, I'm sure property was very cheap then, but ended up with a lot of property, acres and acres.
Until
of,
y'all sold most of your share, in the 80s, was it? Or
what?
did you sell most of your share of the land in the 80s? Remember
Well,
when?
after my father and mother died, we sold. Besides, after the plantation, it was making sugarcane syrup, and he was inventing a harvester, a sugarcane harvester, and he was so pleased with how it was going that he talked to a group of men, and somebody stole his idea and patented it just before he could, which was one of the things that
And you know that.
disappointed him terribly in his life. People used to see the machine after the other guy patented it, and
Right.
it was working, and they'd go by and say, there goes your father's machine, because
Did-
he was actually,
Did he know? Did your when this guy was asking him this question, do you have a feeling that he was asking this so he could steal it, or was he just
No,
interested?
well, I think my father was just so interested in telling everybody. He was so pleased with how it was going. He never dreamed that somebody would pick up
Right.
what he had already really learned and was just about to patent it, but just the other fellow beat him to the patent.
Okay.
And it was too bad because it was one of the big disappointments in his life.
Really?
I remember, yeah.
How do you remember that? Did he say it, or did you just know from
I
your
just,
mother?
I remember hearing the family talk about it, and I'm sure I must have heard him talk about it.
Was it a
And I heard people talk about it.
Was it a disappointment because he wanted the money and the
Oh,
financial?
no,
or he wanted
money didn't really mean a great deal to him. He was a workaholic, and he always wanted to do the best he could, whatever he did. But it wasn't.
Well, so why was it a disappointment? Was it a disappointment?
Well, because he had worked for so long.
Did he not finish the project
It was just about finished, but he just hadn't gone to
get the patent?
get the patent. And he had worked so hard, and it was so disappointing then that somebody else took advantage of his hard work.
Okay.
They had been probably working on Harvester too, but they weren't anywhere near as far along as he was.
Okay.
So when he lectured to them, they just picked up on the lecture and
finished it.
they finished it.
What do you remember about your mom?
But my mom,
Yeah.
I just remember that, I've always been interested in plants and flowers. I don't ever remember her planting anything or picking anything or smelling a flower. And yet, from my father and his love of land, I think I got his genes.
But he probably didn't spend much time with flowers, and
Well,
do you ever remember him
not
doing
with flowers,
anything in
but
the yard?
with vegetables and sugar cane.
Practical things that you had
Practical
to
things.
live on. Okay.
And he could fix anything. In fact, Mother said he was the one who set up a lot of machinery in the backyard when the house was going up. And it was a big house. Mother said he built it. It was such a big house, and he must have had some help, but she always said he had that machinery in the backyard. He was very smart. I don't know how he got so smart.
And he did.
But he wasn't he was sociable with the people that he worked with.
Right. It's quite easy to
All the
just-
people who worked under him.
Right. Thinking about that house. So he built that house, or he came up and designed the house, and probably had his. Now, Felix, did he have brothers?
My father?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one who had, there were about 7 or 8 in the family.
Okay. Now those are not.
And then one sister.
Oh.
One sister and
Oh, that's
other
right.
brothers.
That's Peter Norman's children.
Right.
Were Felix's brothers. So I wonder, they probably helped Felix build the house.
I doubt it,
Why?
because they were busy building their own houses.
But I mean, he couldn't build that house by himself. Wouldn't he have to have somebody to
I
help
think
him?
he must have, because it was,
You think
he
paid
must have
somebody?
had some people who were working for him,
Okay.
because it was, there were fireplaces and 6 rooms, I think,
What do you mean
and
5 places?
chimneys.
5
and
places. You mean there were
fireplaces in
fireplaces?
fireplaces.
Okay.
And
And this is now the house that you've found out in the last 10 years that has been redone, correct?
well, a doctor, after my mother, no, I think it was before my mother died, after my father died, and we were handling things, the house had been rented for a while, but then it was vacant for a long time, and it got in such terrible shape. It was so dilapidated. It really looked like a haunted house,
Right.
because things had grown up, weeds and
And what happened?
well, I was thinking that we really should just have the house torn down and sell the property. But a doctor from Morgan City decided he wanted to buy it, and we sold it very cheap. The land alone would have cost what he paid for the house and the land, because it went from one street to the other. It's quite a large piece of property.
And he's redone the whole house. You
He
just
has,
saw a picture.
he has done a fabulous job. He could have built, I'm sure, a very beautiful house with the money that he has spent
Right.
restoring this.
Now, you've never met him.
Never met him, but we got a picture. My niece, Anel, who lives in Alexandria, she had not seen the renovation, and she went not too long ago and took a picture of it. And the house is beautiful again.
Yeah, I saw the picture. It was
And
nice.
they just restored it back to the way it was originally. They knocked down a garage on each side of the house, which had been built later, and which was in bad shape. But it's restored back to the original way it was.
I remember a story of when y'all went to either clean out the house, you found things in the attic. What were some of the
I was always interested. They had all kinds of good things in the attic.
Like what?
My mother, my father had stored a lot of stuff there, and every time I would go for a visit, one of the highlights of my visit was prowling around in the attic. And my mother used to really worry. She didn't especially want me up there. She thought I'd get
Right.
hurt because part of it was finished and part of it was just had rafters. And I would just, I found some Civil War ammunition.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, I think it had come out of the country store, and when they dissolved the business there, and probably put it up in the attic. And it had been there so long that when we called some authorities, they brought it down very carefully. I think they felt like if they dropped it, the thing could explode. We were very lucky that lightning never struck the house, and the whole house would have exploded with all that
I wonder if
stuff.
there's a museum there that any of this stuff got put in. If
Well-
it was Civil War age. You're not
I don't
sure.
think there was a museum that we knew of,
Okay.
but I gave some things from the attic to a museum here in Lexington, the things that I brought back.
Okay, now was there stained glass found up there that?
There was stained glass, there was a lot of stained glass in the house, the bathroom and
That were used
the
in
dining
windows.
room door that led out of the dining room, and in the attic there was stained glass.
Okay.
And my granddaughter, before the house was sold, she came and got those and just replaced it with
Regular.
regular.
Okay. Change the subject. Let's talk about your brothers and sisters. Your parents had how many kids?
5, and the first one died when she was
5 or 4? Tell me who they
4
were.
or 5.
From the age.
Vera.
Vera, who you
Felix.
never met because she died. Tell me the story about Vera.
when she was 4 or 5 years old.
I like this story.
Actually, my mother's mother in New Orleans was dying, and my mother and her sister Laura and the children, the 2 children went to New Orleans to be with the mother.
This is what year?
Don't ask me
Okay,
years.
Vera. Okay, I'll try to. If you were born in 1911.
She was 2 years older than I. No, she was 2 years older than my brother.
So it's probably
She was 4 years older than I.
So it's probably around 1916 because if
I was
somewhere
born
around
in
1911,
1911.
She was
4 years younger.
okay. So I don't even want to go through the math. It's easy, but anyway, just
Well,
if she was 4.
my Aunt Laura's daughter was ill, and I think they thought she had scarlet fever.
This is Laura's daughter.
Yeah,
'Cause
and they Laura's daughter and mother's daughter were in New Orleans with their mother.
On a train.
Scarlatina, I think they said. But
Scarlatina.
anyway,
y'all went
the
on a-
first child, Vera, caught
Whatever you
what
think.
Fanny Wise had, only it was much worse. She died from it.
Did the daughter die? Did Laura's daughter die?
No, Fanny Wise did not. If it was the same thing that my sister
Okay.
had,
Were
it
people-
must have been a much wilder case.
Were people dying a lot
Yes.
from this? So she
Yeah.
wasn't the only one.
It was an epidemic, I think.
Okay. And this was on a train. You were going from.
Well, when they were bringing, when she got sick, my mother and father got on the train to go back to Patterson, and she.
Or
What
did
she
she ever?
said-
Wait a minute. Did she ever make it to her mother's?
Yeah, they were at her mother's
Okay.
when she got sick.
So did the mother ever die?
Well, the mother died, and the one of the. We skip around, but when my mother and father got their first telephone, that was after they'd come back from New Orleans when my grandmother was ill, and the first call
They ever
was
got when
to say, Blanche, I hate to tell you, but our mother just died, and she says, and I hate to tell you, but our daughter Vera just died.
So she
And
got
that was the first
Who'd
telephone
she get the
call.
call from? One of her sisters?
somebody in New Orleans called.
In the family?
Someone in the family.
Called to say, on the very first call she ever
My
got,
mother's mother, my grandmother, my mother's mother died.
and then she said back to him.
And that was, Vera had just died
Right.
when she got that very first telephone call.
Okay, so I want to get the time frame right. So, Deary went to New Orleans because her mother was dying. And then she hadn't died, but she did her visit in New Orleans, and she started to come back on the train.
No, my sister Vera got ill while she was in New Orleans.
Okay, and decided they better come home.
They better come home.
So she left her mother, who probably knew that her mother was dying.
Oh, they knew she was dying.
What did she die from?
I don't even know.
So anyway, why do you think she left? Why didn't she just stay there and...
Well, because her daughter was ill and they needed to get her home and
But couldn't
try
they
to
see
get
a
her
doctor
well.
there? I mean, why come back if she's ill? She didn't think her daughter was going to die, though. You don't think?
Well, I don't know what they
I just
thought.
wondered why she didn't stay there and try to get her well there.
Well, they had their hands, everybody had their hands
Okay.
full with my grandmother.
I wonder if she thought that,
They didn't need another sick person.
and I wonder if she thought that if Vera was sick, she didn't want the child to be around her own mother and get her any sicker.
Well, I just think there was so much going on with my
Okay.
grandmother that they didn't need another sick
Okay.
child.
So they came home on the train, and
And she
Okay.
said, Papa, I can't see.
this is Vera saying that.
Yeah.
And
And then she got progressively worse. And I think they moved the tub out of the bathroom into the bedroom so that they could, her fever got so high, I think she
wow, keep it down.
tried to keep the fever down.
So
But she died.
when she came back and was in Patterson, was it very many days later that she died? Do you know, or a week?
I don't
or two?
think it was so long because
Okay.
it was just long enough for my grandmother to get worse too.
Okay.
She
So
lived
did
a
they die on
while.
the same day?
They either the same. Well, I would have to look in my genealogy book,
Right.
but it was either the same day or the day before. No, it must have been
Wow.
very close together. If they called just to say that.
Right.
that
That
she
must
had
have been,
died.
I'm just thinking, that must have been so hard for your mother, who loses
it's
the
terrible.
two people almost,
That she loved.
I mean, her own mother and her daughter. The
Her
person that
only
gave
daughter.
birth to her and the person she gave birth to. And at that time, that was the only child, right?
Well, Phil was Felix Jr., who we called Phil.
He had been born?
I think he was just a little about
Baby? Okay.
over a year old.
So Felix, that's another story. Well, let's go back. There was Vera, Felix,
Me
you, Beryl,
and Robert,
and Robert.
who likes to be called Bob.
Bob. Felix, what happened to... I met Felix because, 30 years ago,
Did you really?
I met Felix because Mom took us to Patterson when we were doing one of our cross-country travels. And the only thing I remember about Felix, and this is a story I wanted you to get into about why he was in a wheelchair and what his life was like in the later years, but I just remember he must have been living in a nursing home or somewhere, and we went to visit him, and he was in a wheelchair. He was very nice, and I just remember, because I think we have a picture of me standing beside the wheelchair with him in it, and so I remember.
He didn't have as good a life as the rest of us had, but he was always very sweet. I was always very close to him. He, when he was just a young guy, I remember his hand trembling. And when I think about it, whatever was wrong with him, I think if he'd been taken to a specialist, they probably could have helped, maybe cured whatever it was. I don't remember what they finally.
This is at what age?
But he was always not.
Was he a frail child? Or?
Well, he was not well coordinated.
From what age do you remember? From as long as you remember?
No, he joined the Army. He wasn't that bad when he joined the Army, but because of his health problems, he was given an honorable discharge.
Do you know what health problems he had?
Well, it had to do with a nerve in his neck. If he moved his head a certain way,
it hurt?
It paralyzed him. He would fall.
Oh.
And it was after he was out of the Army that he became really an invalid.
And whatever it was,
He was in a wheelchair before.
Did it get worse? Or did
He
something
got
else
worse.
happen?
At first he walked with a cane, but there was something about, and I don't really know what it was, but something that had to do with the nerve nerves.
Did Mickey ever know? Mickey being a doctor? Did he ever?
I don't think we ever questioned it. We just sort of took it for granted that that's the way it was.
Huh.
But he was,
And he never got married?
no,
ever
before he got into, and before he went to the Army, he visited his brother Bob in Alexandria, and he enjoyed dating.
Was he an attractive young man?
He was a nice-looking young man, but because he was in a wheelchair, he never really dressed up very much.
At what age was he in a wheelchair, though? Wasn't that like, when did,
I'm not sure when he got in a wheelchair. It was after he got out of the Army. And he stayed at home. My mother took care of him, even in a wheelchair, till for a long, long time, until it really got too difficult.
and then he was,
Then he went to a nursing home, but
okay.
she would...
Did he ever live alone? Did he ever live alone?
No, he never lived alone.
Okay, so he really never got to experience life as a person that could achieve by himself.
No.
Was he a happy person?
Well, I think considering his condition, he didn't complain.
Did he ever, you said he didn't complain, but do you think he ever wondered, why me? Why can't I be like my brother and sister?
Well, if he
help
did,
me?
he kept it to himself. He didn't complain.
Was he a talker? Was he a
Yeah, he was nice to be around. He was happy and
He was happy.
talkative, and
Okay. So when you
but
remember,
he just never, because of his infirmities, he never had the good life that the rest of us had.
okay, do you know about how old he was when he died?
He was in his 50s, maybe 50.
And what did he die of? Do you know? Was it a health problem, you think?
Well, it had to do with whatever was causing him to be in the wheelchair.
Okay.
I regret that I never really found out. You know, you just sort of say, well,
That's
it
it.
happened, and,
Right. That's the way it is.
and that's how it is.
Okay.
But and when you're young, you don't think too much about those
And
things.
especially back then, you
now,
probably don't.
now I would wish that I had really known a little bit more.
Right.
And I know my sister, Bill, really didn't get along with him too well, and yet when he had to be hospitalized in New Orleans in a big hospital, she was right there for him. She was wonderful.
I was going to ask you something about, why didn't she get along with him?
Because she wasn't that easy to get along with. She was pretty and popular.
Yeah.
But I don't know. She didn't get along with
That's interesting.
my other brother
Right.
either very
She
well.
didn't get along with Bob very well.
Well, and
But she got along with you.
Well, we got along, but yeah, and when we
But you wouldn't say you were close.
Yeah, we were close, but she still had a temper. She'd get mad at me.
Okay.
She would empty the clothes out of my drawer, and then if I'd smack her one, she'd say, "Mother!"
What's the story about the peeing in bed? When
The
peeing, when somebody peed in bed.
Oh,
I love this story.
that was
too.
me.
Well, tell the story. What
Well, I
happened?
was a teenager, and I had control of my bladder, except for one night. I don't know how it happened. My sister and I were together, and I wet the bed, and I just
shared
wanted
the
to get
bed.
out of the wet
You shared the
spot.
bed, right? You shared.
We shared the bed,
that time.
and I wanted to get out of that wet spot. I wasn't trying to
Sleep there the whole
do
night.
any harm to anybody. I just wanted to get out of that wet spot, and she just happened to roll into it in her sleep. And when she woke up in the morning, she was all wet, and the bed was wet, and they blamed it on her. And I figured if they'd asked me, I'd have told them the truth, but nobody asked me, so I let it go.
So-
She thought she'd done it too.
Now, did you ever tell her later in life?
Oh, we laughed about it once when we were at the airport, and I was on my way home.
Okay, so I wanted you to tell me about your aunts and your relationship. Can you name your aunts? This is Deary was your mother, so it's her sisters.
And Aunt Laura.
Okay. How about tell me from, I want to know how old they were to when they died. So if you can do,
How old they were?
right, when they died.
Well,
Oh,
my
I tell you
mother
what,
was.
you know what, I'm going to stop this for 1 second to put your microphone on. So hold on. Let's see if that stopped it. Nope, didn't stop it yet, so hold on. How to stop. Stop would be there. But that didn't stop it either, so hold on one more second. Okay, let's go back to working again. Okay, tell me about your sisters. I mean your aunt, and I wanted to know how old they were when they died.
Well,
'Cause I know they
my
did.
mother was very close to her.
Okay, and today is Tuesday the 4th, I think, and this is Chatty. It's his house, so he wanted to be in the picture. Okay, and so I've got my questions. Chatty, you want to give Granny a little love for the camera? You want to
Come on,
ham it
Chatty,
up a little
settle down.
bit? You gonna settle down so we can do the interview? Okay. We took pictures of you yesterday, remember? Yeah, okay. Okay, so I wanted you to tell me about your aunts and your relationship. Can you name your aunts? This is, Deary was your mother, so it's her sisters.
And Aunt Laura.
Okay. How about, tell me, I want to know how old they were to when they died. So if you can do,
How old they were.
right, when they died.
Well,
I
my
tell you
mother
what,
was.
you know what, I'm going to stop this for 1 second to put your microphone on, so hold on. Let's see if that stopped it. Nope, didn't stop it yet, so hold on. How to stop. Stop would be there. But that didn't stop it either, so hold on one more second. Okay, let's go back to working again. Okay, tell me about your sisters. I mean your aunt, and I wanted to know how old they were when they died.
Well,
'Cause I know they
my
did.
mother was very close to 100 years old. In a few more months, she would have been.
Right.
And we're thinking about giving a party for her. She was in a nursing home. My Aunt Laura was in her late 90s. All of them lived to be quite old, all four of them.
Oh, what's
No,
her name?
well, one of them, Rose, who lived farther away in Beaumont, Texas, died before the others did, sometimes before the others did. But my Aunt Maud lived to be, I think it was around 102.
Was she the oldest when she died?
No, the oldest was my Aunt Laura.
Okay, well let's start with Laura. Just tell me what you know about Laura when you were growing up. What
Well,
kind
she
of
was
person
just like a second mother to me. Her grandfather had paid for her to take music from a very fine teacher somewhere other than in Louisiana, but she could have been a concert pianist, and she taught me to play the piano, and I do remember when we would play for my mother and father. I would be playing just a simple little part,
Right.
and she would just be going up and down, and it sounded wonderful, and she would look around at the mother to say, "Isn't Anel doing beautifully?"
Did she give lessons? I mean, did she give lessons?
She did to a few people, but it was mostly to me.
Okay.
And she had me playing pretty good. She never taught me to memorize music like a lot of the teachers do.
Right.
But I could read music very well. I could pick up pretty important pieces and play them fairly well. Even the first time, I could read real well.
Now, did Laura have kids of her own?
She had a son and a daughter, and the daughter, she saw to it that the daughter took dancing lessons from a very fine teacher somewhere, and so later, after we were together in Louisiana, I was still in high school, I think, she taught me all of the things practically that she had learned, and
The
she was
dances and stuff.
yeah, she was glad to have somebody doing exercises with her.
Now, who's her daughter? Do I know?
Fanny Wise.
Fanny Wise.
She
That
was
was who you
she was
roomed
my
with.
double first cousin.
Now, was that who you roomed with in college? Fanny Wise?
No, Annie Wise was
Annie
Annie Maud's daughter,
So there's an Annie Wise
and a Fanny Wise.
Okay.
And Annie Wise was the grandmother of Fanny Wise, and Annie Wise.
Who was the grandmother?
Annie Wise,
Annie Wise
Baldwin.
was the grandmother of.
Fanny Wise, and Annie Wise.
Okay.
It was my mother's.
So there were two
my
Annie
mother's mother.
Wises. There were two Annie Wises. One was a grandmother.
Yeah.
And one was
and the
a cousin.
and the granddaughter was an Anel Wise named after her.
Okay, well, that's going to get too complicated for me.
Yeah, it is.
I wanted just to go with Laura. So
Well,
anyway,
Aunt Laura taught me music, and her daughter Fanny Wise taught me every kind of dance,
Okay.
acrobatics.
and the son,
Tap.
Laura's son was,
Stanley, and I think he's still alive. I haven't checked with him lately. His wife died,
Okay.
and he was in a nursing home
Okay.
and had bad arthritis. He was bent over almost double.
okay, enough with them for now. So that was Laura. Then
Laura.
talk about Maud. Maud lived, you said, to be about 102.
And she was she was wonderful. She lived. I used to visit her and her family
Where did she live? Did she
in
not live in Patterson?
Opelousas, Louisiana,
Okay.
and
How far was that from
and
where you
later.
all- How far was that from where you lived?
I don't really know in miles.
But how long would it take? I mean, could you go visit them anytime you
Well,
wanted, or was there some distance between?
Well, I visited them sometimes,
Okay.
and
Did she live the furthest away? Maud.
no, Aunt Rose lived in Texas. I was out of Louisiana. She was the farthest away.
Okay.
Aunt Laura lived in the same town that I did.
Patterson.
She was the one who taught me music.
Okay. So go back to Maud. Maud, what do you remember about
Well,
her?
she was the mother of my roommate at college.
You wanna leave?
Oh, come on, come on.
Gotta go somewhere. Whoops.
Goodbye.
Oh, he's going to his corner. Gotta put your microphone on. He messed it up. Okay, so Maud, what?
Maud was a very loving aunt,
Okay.
and she was the mother of her daughter Annie Wise. Roomed with me at.
Okay, it was Annie Wise who.
Well, Fanny Wise was Aunt Laura's daughter,
Right,
and
but Annie Wise
was
was your cousin who you roomed with at college.
Yeah.
Okay. And the grandmother of Annie Wise was also Annie Wise. Okay. So going back to Maud, if Laura was the musician and the one that taught you music, what was something that I can remember Maud by? Was she just was she a homemaker? Was she an artist?
Well, see, I didn't see her that much because she lived.
Okay. So were you not as close to her as the rest of them? If you said that Laura.
Well, I was probably closest to my Aunt Stella and to Aunt Laura.
Okay.
Because Aunt Laura lived in the same town, taught me music. Aunt Stella lived in New Orleans and had a daughter almost my age.
What was
And
her
we-
name? What was
Her daughter's-
Stella's name? Stella's daughter's name.
Joelle.
Okay.
And because we all got along so well, I spent most of my, a big part of most of my summers there
Okay. So Stella.
when I grew up.
Okay. What do you remember about Stella?
Well, she was another like a mother to me. She was at the organized club called the Sunshine Club, and she was strict, but she did so much for me. I could never.
Like what? What did she do for you?
Well, I stayed at her house. That was before I met my husband
Right.
in New Orleans, and I had meals. They were not rich, but they were well off. She had two maids. One did the cooking and one did the serving and a lot, and probably the laundry and a lot of things. But they always had a nice table. My uncle would carve the meat, and the maid would bring everybody's plate around to get the meat that he carved.
And who was the uncle?
Everything was done in style.
Okay. What was the uncle's name? Stella's husband.
Uncle Charles, and he ended up with Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And Aunt Stella, his wife, was so wonderful. He was in a nursing home, and she would go every day to feed him, and they were a loving couple. Well, she was just so wonderful to me. I just sort of took it for granted that she would always be there for me, and she was.
Whatever happened to Joellen?
Well, Joelle
Joelle.
married and lived in Memphis, Tennessee, the daughter,
Right.
and ended up with dying. She was on the golf course, and I don't know what happened, whether she lost control or not, but she had an accident when she was in the golf course, in the golf cart, and died. It was.
From the accident. Was she healthy otherwise?
Yes, I think so.
So that was a tragic
Yes, and she
accident.
was attractive.
So that was a tragic accident.
Terrible tragedy.
Was there any lawsuit?
Well, I don't know. It was probably her own fault. I mean, just something happened when she was driving the golf cart.
Wow.
I never
How old
heard
was she?
differently.
How old was she when she died? About?
Well, she had a grown son who had died, married son, and the other one was,
What was the name of the son that died? Do you know? Remember?
I can't remember right off.
Do you know what he died from?
I think he had a cancer. I'm not sure, but I think he did.
Okay, so now talk to me about Rose.
Well, Aunt Rose lived in Texas, so I didn't see as much of her.
Now, how did she
But-
get to Texas when everybody else
Well,
was
because
in?
see, my grandmother had a boarding house.
Annie Wise, the grandmother?
Yes,
Okay.
and they called it a fashionable boarding house. I think
That was in where, New Orleans?
in New Orleans, and a lot of the boys who boarded there ended up by marrying
The daughters.
some of the daughters. My father did that.
Okay.
Married my
Dear,
mother
your
Blanche,
And
and because he had gone to I think it was called Soleil, a business school in New Orleans, and they just mostly kept people that they knew were from good families.
okay. Now, what was the story? Was there a set of twins that married into the family?
Of who?
Twins. Were there?
No, I have a double first cousin. My mother and her sister Laura married brothers.
Okay. Your
So they were
mother-
double first
okay, hold on.
cousins.
Your mother, Dearie, and your
Aunt Laura,
and Aunt Laura married brothers.
brothers, Norman brothers.
Norman brothers.
So we were double first, the children were double first cousins.
And their names were, the brothers' names were,
Felix, my father was Felix,
right?
and Henry
Henry.
was the one who married Aunt Laura.
Okay, okay. Okay, so what do you, if I wanted to know something about Rose, what would you remember about Rose?
Well, I remember the visit. I think I only visited her once when I was a teenager, early teenager, and I remember that she taught me to make some kind of a little sewing kit. It was material with a little pocket and the other thing folded over.
Right.
And I remember her telling her friends when she was saying it off to people, didn't she make little tiny stitches, which I really did, but she helped teach me how to do that, and the little sewing kit was for safety pins and straight pins and things like that, with a little pocket for other things. And I remember my children, when they went off to school, used it, and then until very recently I still had it. I'm right now not sure what I did with it,
Okay.
but it was something I had for a long, long time. And then when I visited her, I do remember one of her friends had given me lots of books that were appropriate for my age.
Right.
And I remember taking them home and reading them and loving them.
Okay. So that was, we've gone from Maud, Laura,
And Stella,
Stella,
that's all of them.
and Rose.
Yeah, and my mother.
So that your mother was the fifth one. That's why I thought
She
there
was the
were five.
youngest one.
So there were 5 aunts.
Well, that's not five.
Laura, Rose, Maud, Stella, Dearie.
Well, that is right.
I thought there were 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think this is getting close to the end of this tape, so I'm going to cut it off, and then I'm going to ask you some other questions, just so we don't have to stop the tape in the middle, okay?
Okay.
Let me see. It's working now, the remote. Okay.
I know right now this is not something that you planned on me saying or want me to
You can
say.
say anything you want.
Well, I just want to tell you how glad I am that you are my grandson. You are kind, considerate, generous,
Thank you.
a lot of other superlatives. I'm proud of you, and we've had such a great relationship.
We have had
and I
a
want you to
great
know that I'm
relationship.
very proud of you and very thankful because you've always been here when I needed you.
Well, I always tell people you're like my best friend. I don't know.
I feel that way about you.
You're just so easy,
It's-
but you're so easy to get along with everybody. But
But
I
we
don't
have
know.
an especially close relationship,
Right,
and
we do. I
I'm
don't-
proud of it.
You know what I remember about? I remember about my 2 grandmothers, but about you, this is just something I always remember, and it was probably nothing to you, but I always remember that you used to make me applesauce. You
I
made
did.
stewed apples, and you always had them, and you always knew I loved them, and I always felt guilty eating them because I could eat everything that you made, and I remember watching you peel them and cut them and broil them, and I could just eat them like in 2 minutes, and it would take you maybe 2 hours to do that whole process.
You shouldn't have felt guilty about
I
that.
never told you I did because I didn't want you to stop making them for me, so I was selfish. But I always thought, my God, you spend a lot of time doing that for me. And to me, that was love. And you know, my other grandmother used to make me baked apples. Well, actually, she had them. I think her maid made them sometime. But so I had apples coming out.
Out of the ears.
Yeah, but I remember you always had them. I always looked forward to them, and it just meant a lot to me.
And you always had a really big appetite. You were a tiny little guy, but
I
you
did.
could always eat a lot of food, and you never got fat.
No, that's true. I did eat a lot. My share and everybody else's. Okay, my other questions are, I wanted you to tell me about the Depression years and the stock market. Stock market happened around the 1930s. So you were born in, I think, 1911. So you would have been about 19. It was such a big incident when it happened.
Well, that's right, but you know, I was in Vicksburg, Mississippi, learning to be a laboratory technician, and you know, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to what was going on in the outside world. I had such a busy schedule, working and having fun, playing tennis, and
Right.
I wasn't too much in reading the paper.
Do you even? I mean, if you can kind of put yourself back, if you say you were studying to be a lab technician, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I don't even know if you can remember back then, but did you even realize that something had happened?
Oh, it was a terrible depression. Surely I knew that. And I knew that during the depression, people were jumping out of windows, they were losing money and going broke. And it was a very bad time.
How were you able to stay in school when most people didn't have money to eat, and here you were still able to stay in school? I would have thought there would have been a lot of people that dropped out because they didn't have the money and they had to go home to their families.
Well, actually, I just went to LSU 1 year, and then I went to a private school where I did actual work once I learned the techniques of doing things.
Right.
I know my uncle sent me $50 a month when I was at LSU, and also he was sending it to me when I was in Vicksburg, Mississippi, learning to be a laboratory technician. But after a while, I think I began to earn a little money, and I'm sure it wasn't very much.
Okay.
But I remember that I had always said the first money I earned, I would buy my mother a dress with it, which I did, and send it to her. And that was the very first money. But
Did she appreciate that?
oh yes, she
wore the
very
dress?
appreciative. Well, I had a picture of her. She sent it with
Okay.
dressed up in it.
Okay, let me go back to the Depression years, though. So there's not much you can really remember about.
Not too much.
Did your father say anything about business being bad? Because he was working the
Well,
plantation, right?
I just knew that during that depression, my father had to mortgage almost everything he had. He had a lot of land, and
And he had to mortgage it, why?
because
to pay
times were
bills?
so
To
bad.
pay bills, or to pay bills, or to hold on to the
I guess
plantation?
must have been to pay bills, because
Do you think all the brothers had to mortgage what they had?
I don't know about them.
Okay.
I just knew about my dad, and luckily he was able to
Get out of it?
get out of it and get it back.
Okay.
And that meant a lot to us children then, because we inherited it, and it was a very nice inheritance.
Okay. You had mentioned some. Oh, I know. I'm deviating from. My next thing was what you had just brought up. How did you ever think to study lab technology? Why did that interest you?
I think there were several people who had taken this course in Vicksburg, Mississippi, which was a private school in a hospital, and they had done real well. And I think a relative of the doctor who was in charge of the program came to visit. The name was Holcomb's, and somehow or another my mother heard about it and thought it would be a good thing. And we still had some more children. Times were hard, and there wasn't that much money. I would have loved to have been able to go 3 more years to LSU, but they were thinking that with times being so hard, and they had 2 more children to educate, that this would be a good thing for me, which it did turn out to be a very good thing.
So you went there knowing you were going to study what you studied,
Yes.
and you knew it was going to be 1 year because,
No, it was 2 years, and I didn't go home for 2 years. It was winter. It was a complete 2 years.
okay, so you
I
finished
never
the
had a
course.
vacation.
You finished the 2 years, and you said the reason why you didn't do 3 or 4 years was because they didn't have, this course was for 2 years, and they needed the money.
Well,
maybe-
then the course was for 2 full years, the whole year. And like I said, I didn't go home at all for 2 years.
Right.
And then I was offered a job there.
Okay.
But I wanted to get out and see the world, and I was anxious to get home
So
to
did
see
you
my
take the job?
family.
Did you accept the job?
No, I didn't accept it.
So you went home?
And I thought it was regular singular because there was
thought it was
one.
what?
I thought it was rather singular that I was asked to stay. I was the only one, the first one asked to stay.
Okay.
And there was one girl who really was not so easy to get along with, but she was very brilliant. And I would have thought that he would have asked her instead of me. I guess because I'm an eager beaver and interested in learning. I wasn't as smart as she was, but I got along with people a lot better.
Okay.
And so when I refused, she said, just don't tell anybody if you don't mind that I asked you, because I will
Asked the other one.
get one of the others. And
Okay. So you went home, and then how did you get your job doing that?
well, it was during the Depression. It was very hard to get a job. I wrote to lots of doctors, and the only thing that turned up were the doctors' noses. They couldn't afford to pay for just a laboratory technician. If you could do maybe typing and a lot of other things,
Right.
there was still a small chance of getting a job because there just wasn't the money
Okay.
for it. Loads of people were out of work. So I finally offered my services to Dr. Dunbar, who was at the head of the LSU Medical School,
Okay.
and offered my services
Free?
free
Right.
for about a month.
And this was
And then-
LSU, so now you went from Patterson back to,
No, this was in New Orleans now.
okay. So you had gone
that-
home from school and couldn't find a job.
Right.
So then you went back to New Orleans.
To New Orleans.
To try to offer your services,
Um,
and he accepted?
Well, after a month, I was paid all of $50 a month in one meal. Now people are making, how much do people make now?
Well, that, I don't know per hour, but if you made $50 a month, that would have been $500 a year, and they're probably making at least $40,000.
Yeah.
So 40
well, things
times.
were a lot different then. It was during the Depression, and I was lucky to get a job
Okay,
at
so
all.
let me go back. So you offered your services for a month, hoping that he would hire you, and after the month, he did hire you.
Yes.
Right? Paying you $50 a month plus a meal.
And I still had to pay, out of that $50, I was paying for a streetcar, which wasn't very expensive. But that's your phone.
That's the phone. Hold on. Camera. Let's see if I know how to work this.
Can you turn it on?
I can. Hello? Hello?
Don't trip over the cord.
Hello? 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 Hopefully they won't call back. Okay. Let's see. So, hold on. Okay. So after a month, you were offered a job.
And I was
with
staying
me.
with my Aunt Stella at this time too. And she was just wonderful.
Okay, Aunt Stella, this isn't the boarding house. You weren't staying at the boarding house. No. Were you staying at the boarding house?
The boarding house was what my grandmother had. This was my Aunt Stella. The boarding house was where my mother lived.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I see. I wanted to.
I was in New Orleans, and they had the daughter named Joel and the
Right.
son named Charles.
I'm just curious now that I made that mistake. Did they didn't still run the boarding house,
Well, my grandmother had been dead for quite a while by this time.
so it was gone? Okay. So anyway, you got a job as a lab technician, and how long did you stay at that job?
Well, when I was in New Orleans, I met Mickey, who
Later,
was a sophomore in medical school.
right?
And he was going to Tulane, which was right, there was a street that divided the Charity Hospital and the LSU Medical School. They were right next door,
Right.
with a street to divide them. And when we fell in love, I don't remember what I was there for. Let's see, must have been for just about a year,
Okay.
maybe a little over,
Okay.
because Mickey and I were married.
Okay. Oh, Chatty's
And
back.
then-
Chatty, I hear you. Chatty, do you want to come up?
Come on,
Come here, Chatty.
Come on.
I think he does. He just
Come
needs
on.
a little help with his hind.
a lot of help.
Okay.
Come on, get beside me, you silly dog.
Chatty, come here. Come over here.
Come on.
Come talk. Okay. He's not
Yeah.
going to talk. I know you had told me two stories, and I don't know if they happened in Louisiana or if they happened in Greensboro, where you later got a job doing lab work. One of the stories was, I think this happened in Louisiana. You say, or you think, that Huey Long, who was the governor of Louisiana at the time, that you lost your job,
Absolutely.
and you think it was from his doing. Tell me that story.
Oh, well, this is when I had the job at
For a
LSU
year?
Medical School. We were working on charity, the charity hospital patients.
Okay.
Dr. Donwell was the head of it, and I got to know his secretary pretty well. And I made the mistake one day of, I really, politics didn't really mean anything to me at all, but I knew that my family hated Huey P. Long, and I just made the remark that if he was the last person on earth, I would never vote for him. And I'm sure she went back and told Dr. Donwell, and in no time at all, I was fired.
Because Dr. Donwa was a friend of Huey Long's?
He was under, everybody who had jobs got them because of Huey P. Long. He was the kingfish down there.
Right.
And,
He had that much control?
oh, he controlled the state, he really did.
How did Huey Long ever hear of little Anel Block and the comment that she made?
Well, Huey P. Long did not hear about it, but Dr. Donwell fired me, and I couldn't imagine why, because I really was well trained. I knew I did a good job.
Right.
And when I wrote my family and they knew about it, they told my cousin who lived right next door and was a lawyer and a speaker of the House of Representatives in Baton Rouge about it. And he wrote back and said, you didn't lose your job because you were not doing good work. You lost it because you were a relative of mine. He was the Speaker of the House, and he was at the head of a committee to get Huey P. Long out of office.
So you think it just took that amount of time for Huey Long to make the connection?
Well, Huey P. Long never did it. It's just that Dr. Donwell, who was a stooge of Huey P. Long's, it was because
They put
he
you
was
two
a
together?
stooge, and because I said something against him,
Okay.
I was
Okay.
fired.
So did you think he was a nice guy before that, or just...
Well, I never really knew him. I just knew his secretary.
Okay.
But I knew that my family
Okay.
were all, and so, there were so many people, again, the ones who
Before him had the jobs?
had jobs were for him.
Okay.
But he was,
Okay.
he
Why did your family hate him? Why did people hate him down there?
well, he did so many things that just were wrong.
Like what? What was one thing that would get your family to hate somebody? 'Cause,
well-
I mean, I don't think of a politician and hate him in today's time.
I'll tell you about a little incident about Huey P. Long. I had one aunt in New Orleans who was very well off and had a beautiful home, and Huey P. Long lived right next door. And one day he started banging on her door. He was drunk and thought that he was at home, but he was banging on my aunt's house.
Right.
He was, I really don't remember all the things, but he was later assassinated,
Right,
you know.
right. Who was the aunt that he was banging? Who was it? Maud, Stella, Laura? When you said that he was banging on your aunt's door.
Well, this was really a great aunt, I think.
Okay.
It was,
Okay,
yeah.
not your mother's sister.
It was a great aunt.
Okay. Okay, the other story I have, was that all you needed to say about that, or did you have anything else?
Yeah.
Okay. The other story I think happened in Greensboro. You were telling me that one day I don't know if this happened to you, or you told somebody that you needed a lab urine specimen, so they went into the closet and the clothes came down from the laundry chute?
Oh,
Now tell me that. And where did it happen? And did it happen to you or somebody else?
well, I was working at the hospital for over a year.
In Greensboro?
In Lexington, where I live, Lexington,
Okay.
Patterson.
In Patterson?
Wait a minute.
I thought it was Greensboro, but I might be remembering wrong. It doesn't-
Well, it was in Lexington.
Okay,
That's Lexington Memorial Hospital.
Okay.
And doing lab work there.
You were.
I hadn't worked for years and years, and I had decided to go back to work.
Okay.
And the techniques had all changed. It was a little difficult for me to go back. But anyway, she had diabetes, and
Who
so
had diabetes? The person that
the
you
person I was working on had diabetes, and I had to take a blood test at certain intervals.
Okay.
And then she had to get a urine specimen. And when she went to the bathroom, it was locked. Somebody was in it, and I needed to get it right away. And so I remembered that there was a closet pretty close to the laboratory. And so I said, well, just why don't you go in there and turn on the light and get the specimen? It'll be over in a minute.
Yeah.
And as soon as she bent down to get the specimen, a lot of clothes fell in from the roof. It was the
Laundry.
dirty laundry that was falling in
That was
there.
the closet.
Yes, she could have gotten very angry at me, but I remember she worked in a restaurant, and every time I'd go in the restaurant, we'd just look at each other and start laughing.
So she thought it was kind of funny too?
Well, at first she probably didn't think it was so funny to have all that dirty laundry dropped in on.
I don't know why I remember that story, but that was a good one for me. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to ask you right now. Oh, okay. This one can be a short one, and then we may call it a day. Me and Beryl were talking yesterday again about how you still have so much fire in you that you want to stay alive. So my question is, why do you have this fire at your age when you have some of the medical problems that you have, and especially the bladder tumors that may end up killing you because your bladder is almost shot? So why not at your age? Because if it was me, I would just say, I'll live as good as I can, and then when I'm ready to die, so be it. But you like try to fix everything in your body and try to stave it off. Why not at 92 just say, I've lived a good life, I'm going, let's go.
Well, because I'm still living a good life.
Okay, really?
Yes, I'm very, very happy with it.
I know you are.
Listen, it's a whole new ball game. When I got macular degeneration and my ears got bad,
Yeah.
I couldn't do any of the things that I used to do and love to do. But there are other things to do when you can't do those things, and other people to know. And
Even though you've lived 92 years and you must be tired. I think of Randy. Randy, our cousin, who just died about 2 days ago. He was probably 53 years old, and I know he wasn't ready to die either.
well, when you get
look
to,
at somebody like that,
well, when I get to feeling so bad and hurting so bad and getting so totally dependent, then I've used my body. I've had a great life.
all right,
I'm still having, it's still fine, but when I get totally dependent and if the mind starts to go, I really hope I won't live.
Okay.
And I don't care about suffering.
okay. So you still feel good enough to,
Oh yeah, I can still take care of things. It's a whole new ball game,
okay.
but
You're adjusting.
it's
well.
interesting. It's still interesting.
It's amazing that, because I'm 45 this month, and, if I told Beryl yesterday that I'm probably going to be like Randy. I'll probably end up dying of colon cancer before I get 60. Only because people that have colon problems like I do, a lot of them seem to develop cancer, and more often than not, it may start as colon cancer. So, that might happen to me. I kind of think it will before I'm 60, so I'm not thinking I'm going to have a long life, but that's okay. If I died tomorrow, I've had a good life. I've had a great life. I'm happy. Okay.
That's exactly how I feel. I've had a great life. I can look back on loads of wonderful memories. Had a loving
But
family.
you're trying to
Still
keep
do.
yourself fixed, and if I get in some of the shape that maybe you were in, I don't know if I would take chemotherapy. I don't know.
Well,
those
now
kind
at
of
this
things.
stage, I don't know that I could stand another operation. And I don't, whenever I've had this long, good life, and anytime it's time for me to go, it's going to be okay with me.
Okay. Okay, I think that, do you have anything else to say before we,
You know,
okay.